From the 1970s through the 1990s, there wasn't a better program in college football than Nebraska. National championships, Heisman winners, greats of the game, Memorial Stadium, maybe the scariest place to play in the entire country. Then the calendar flipped to the 21st century, and not long after that, Nebraska was no longer Nebraska. Gradually, Nebraska's focus became less about winning national championships and more about making a freaking bowl game. A lot of people like to ask what happened to Nebraska football. But you can't answer that question unless you ask a different one first. How did Nebraska get so good in the first place? Welcome to Dead Letters. It's a series from Split Zone Duo, my college football podcast, and it's about when bad things happen to good teams. If you looked at a map and wanted to plop down a college football team somewhere in search of greatness, you definitely wouldn't pick Nebraska. It's one of the least populous states in the country. They love their football there, but you'll barely be able to find any 4- and 5-star recruits. And it's not like Nebraskans are rich either. A team here can't just buy its way to success. The state isn't overflowing with oil money like, say, Texas. The people in Nebraska wanted a great football team, and in the early years of the sport, they sometimes got one. Still, the school wasn't a national power. The Associated Press rankings poll started in 1936, and while Nebraska appeared in those rankings pretty often, it was rarely very high up. And things were about to get harder. World War II changed pretty much everything in this sport, as the young men who played college football went off to fight against the Axis. And after the Allies won the war, things in college football settled into this new normal with a bunch of crazy things happening. Like, Notre Dame was winning every national championship. Army was one of the best teams in the country. There were suddenly separate players for offense and defense. And Nebraska? Well, Nebraska was pretty bad. From 1941 until the early 60s, the Huskers were a picture of mediocrity, or worse. They had 3 winning seasons in 20 years, playing for coaches like the unforgettable Biff Jones, Adolf Lewandowski, and Potsy Clark. And who couldn't love a guy named Potsy? Well, Nebraska fans couldn't, not while Oklahoma had the legendary Bud Wilkinson, one of the greatest coaches in the country, running a dynasty in Norman. Every other team in the region was in the Sooners' shadow. Being second fiddle at Missouri or Kansas or Colorado might have been one thing, but this was Nebraska, a state of corn and football dreams. Yet dreaming about catching Oklahoma was a lot different than actually doing it. Nebraska had a lot of disadvantages. The school had opened up Memorial Stadium in 1923, but it wasn't big, and every time they tried to add to it, something got in the way. So there the Huskers were after the war, playing bad football and puttering along in a 31,000-seat stadium without updated facilities and not feeling too great about it. Losing games with coaches named Biff and Potsy. And in desperate need of a savior who could do for them what Wilkinson had been doing for their Big 8 conference rivals, Oklahoma. In 1962, the Cornhuskers were on the hunt for a new head football coach, but the athletic director, Tippy Dye, seemed to keep getting turned down. Fortunately, one guy who didn't want the job, Michigan State's Duffy Daugherty, at least gave the athletic director a name. Daugherty told the Huskers to hire Bob Devaney, a former assistant of his at Michigan State who had been winning a bunch of games as the head coach at Wyoming. Nebraska didn't have many other options, and Devaney was a good candidate. He took the job. And pretty quickly, the ball started bouncing in the right direction. Devaney's first year brought a tripling of the program's win total from 3 games to 9, and also a victory in the Gotham Bowl. No, Bain was not there. Devaney brought some help with him. One of his earliest hires was actually a volunteer, a young coach by the name of Tom Osborne, who didn't get paid, but at least got free meals. Osborne helped Devaney design and install a version of the triple option offense, which they like to run out of the I formation. And by golly, it worked. The Huskers were running the dang ball up and down the field. Why could Nebraska run the ball so well? Well, good scheme, but also the Huskers had some beefy boys. A few years into his tenure, Devaney made another crucial hire. Osborne, who had worked with him on the offense, had really pushed for this one. Do you know how nowadays every college football team has a strength coach? They all look pretty much the same and help these young men get yoked so they can be ready for physical combat. Well, in the 1960s, nobody was doing that yet. Devaney agreed that Nebraska should be an innovator in this space, and so he hired this guy, Boyd Epley. You can think of Epley as the very first strength coach in college football, at least as we think of the job today. He designed a robust regimen to make Nebraska's players more physical and more durable, and with proper nutrition and an investment in a serious weight room, the Huskers got big. The option offense is cool, but it does not work if you can't push people around, and the Huskers became serious bullies. They mostly did it the old-fashioned way, and I do mean mostly. All of this worked in a virtuous cycle. The strength program was especially helpful because Nebraska was able to take tons of walk-ons, players who didn't even have scholarships, get them into the weight room, and make them into these monsters. Nebraska wasn't that expensive a school, and for in-state students, it wasn't that hard to get into. So the Huskers loaded up the roster with a walk-on program and with a giant team of about 120 scholarship players. Nebraska would get these players, turn them over to the strength program with Epley, and help them get huge. Over the years, dozens of Nebraska walk-ons went on to play in the NFL, way more than the walk-ons from any other school. By 1970, Devaney's rebuild was coming to fruition. The Huskers went 11-0-1 and were national champions for the first time. The next year, more of the same. 13-0. Oranges. Champs. The next year, in 1972, receiver Johnny Rodgers brought the Heisman Trophy to Lincoln for the first time. And when Devaney retired after 1972, Osborne took his seat in the big chair. And somehow the Huskers just kept on getting better. Osborne honed the option offense even further, and despite all of the difficulties forged by being in Nebraska, the offense just stayed great. Do you think there are a lot of high school football players in Nebraska who are running 4.40s? No, there are not. But as the program kept winning and winning and winning, it got easier for Nebraska to go into other states and pull out really talented players. Running back Mike Rozier, another Heisman winner, came from Camden, New Jersey. QB Tommy Frazier, an all-time great, came from Bradenton, Florida. And of course, the best players from Nebraska, like running back Amon Green, were mortal locks to stay home. Who could play at Nebraska? Pretty much anybody the Huskers wanted. Back in these days, Nebraska still played in the Big 8, which would later become the Big 12. And the Big 8 was different than most conferences in that it allowed teams to recruit players who didn't have either very high GPAs or very high test scores. Nebraska had a lot of those players, called partial qualifiers and sometimes non-qualifiers, on its roster. All of those players and all of that winning eventually helped Nebraska build up a serious advantage in facilities too. By the 1960s, Memorial Stadium had been getting bigger, and now, in the decades that followed, it was getting enormous. The weight room was cutting edge too. Epley, the strength coach, couldn't make these players into monsters without the proper equipment. So Nebraska had 1, huge rosters, 2, with pretty loose eligibility standards, and 3, an amazing strength program with 4, some of the best facilities anywhere, all tied together by 5, some of the greatest coaches in the history of college football, Bob Devaney and then Tom Osborne. That corn will crunch. Nebraska's numbers under these 2 coaches are bananas. They are the best program in the country, full stop. Osborne retired as coach after 1997, and as easy as he had made it look when he replaced Devaney, coming after a legend isn't easy. But Nebraska had another problem. Right around the time that Osborne was exiting, college football was changing in big ways that undercut all of the advantages Nebraska had spent decades building up. Take the stadium. Nebraska had an all-around facilities edge in the 60s and 70s. But over time, rivals started looking at what Nebraska had built and deciding to build something like that for themselves. Everyone has made their stadiums bigger and better, and everyone has a fancy practice facility with a state-of-the-art weight room, not to mention a barber shop or maybe a mini golf course. Or take the strength program, because Nebraska and Boyd Epley, they were first, but imitation is and always will be the best form of flattery. Nebraska isn't the only team making guys bigger, better, faster, stronger. Every team has a strength coach now who looks like they were ripped right out of a comic book. In fact, a lot of those teams hired strength coaches who worked directly for Boyd Epley. That's one of the reasons why Nebraska's amazing walk-on program can't be that special anymore, because they no longer can just take these players who didn't get scholarship offers elsewhere and train them up into these war daddies who can tower over other teams' scholarship players. Plus, your roster can't be as big as Osborne used to prefer, because of tighter scholarship limits that Nebraska seriously opposed. It also got harder to win championships running the ball. Nowadays, teams have high-flying passing attacks that score so many points so fast that nobody will ever win it all with the triple option ever again. Not when there are offenses like 2019 LSU or 2020 Alabama chucking the ball around. Plus, recruiting changed. It's less local now and a lot more national. All the good players have highlight tapes that anyone can find. You might think that would be good for a school like Nebraska that isn't located in a traditional hotbed of talent. Before, if Nebraska found a really good player in a state even like Texas or Florida or California, they might have been able to keep him a secret and ultimately bring him to Lincoln without other teams noticing. But now, good luck with that. And remember how Nebraska benefited from having all of those players who came up a bit short on either their test scores or their GPA? When the Big 12 formed in the early 1990s, the new conference got way stingier about that. And by the time Nebraska moved to the Big 10 in 2011, it was clear that the Huskers would have to play by much tighter eligibility rules for the rest of eternity. Now, did Nebraska also make some big mistakes? Yes. This is not just a story of things happening to Nebraska. In the 2000s, the school had an athletic director, Steve Peterson, whom a lot of fans blame for a series of decisions. Firing Frank Solich, the beloved son of the program who came after Osborne, and then hiring Bill Callahan, the head coach of the Oakland Raiders, in a move that really did not work out. Peterson himself got fired after that, and a succession of Nebraska coaching hires didn't do a great job either. LSU defensive coordinator Bo Pelini did okay, but was kind of a pain and got fired. Oregon State head coach Mike Riley never got out of neutral. Native son, former Nebraska quarterback, and undefeated UCF head coach Scott Frost. I think the less said about that failure, the better. But I'm not even sure that a bunch of perfect coaching hires in a row would have changed the big picture story that we are telling. Nebraska became the most fearsome program in all of college football by doing things that others weren't doing at all or doing them better, whether that was the elite walk-on program or advanced strength and conditioning or the early push to be the best in facilities. So now I think we can answer the question, what happened to Nebraska? The Huskers did everything right, and then, bit by bit, everyone else did too. If you like this video, I think you'll also like the Split Zone Duo podcast, and especially our Dead Letters episodes about when bad things happen to good teams. There's one right here about the downfall of Tulane, and if you want more videos like this, subscribe to this channel. We'd love to make them for you.